All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Christina, and I'm the Family Engagement Coordinator for San Francisco Public Library, located on the unceded ancestral land of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples. Happy Women's History Month, everyone. We are starting off March right today. Here at SFPL, we celebrate women everywhere through our special program series, Her Story. Check out the Her Story webpage at San Francisco Public Library's website to see our upcoming events, find great books by and about women, authors, and illustrators, and more. I'm really happy to be here with you all to celebrate Women's History Month with Career Girls and a fantastic panel of creative, passionate, and very successful women, ANYA Adams, Ann Collins Smith, and Charmin Roundtree Baaqee. Before we start, just a few brief announcements. We invite you to join us to continue the celebration of Her Story next Wednesday, March 10th, for a very special conversation about community, unity, and the power of youth voice in these times, in a conversation between two incredibly talented poets and friends, Elizabeth Acevedo, National Book Award winning author of The Poet X and many other titles, along with Mahogany L. Brown, author of Woke, a young poet's call to justice, which just came out this year. Thank you to our friends at the San Francisco Unified School District for bringing this very special program to the library. And we hope that you can catch this conversation right here on YouTube at 2 o'clock next week on March 10th. Before we start, a huge thanks to the friends at the San Francisco Public Library for their generous support of this entire program series. We simply could not do it without them. Thank you so much, friends. And without further ado, I'm very pleased to welcome Linda Calhoun, founder and CEO of Career Girls, to kick off this fantastic panel. Hi, Linda.
Hello, Christina.
If you're not familiar yet with Career Girls, careergirls.org is a comprehensive video-based career exploration and readiness tool for girls. It's free and easy to use and free of ads. You know we love that at the library. They have the largest collection of online career guidance videos focusing exclusively on diverse and accomplished women, over half of whom are in STEM fields. And they add content weekly, so definitely check out careergirls.org. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton to you, Linda. Please take it away.
Yes, thank you so much, Christina, and the San Francisco Public Library for hosting us today. And as the founder of Career Girls, it's been my life's work to travel this earth to provide a platform for sharing the stories of hundreds of diverse and accomplished women like the ones you'll hear from today. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our panel of Career Girls role models. I'm just going to touch on the highlights, and I invite you to read their full bios in the event page description. In alpha order, ANYA Adams is an award-winning Canadian-American director of the #1 show on Netflix, Ginny and Georgia. The Alice Initiative named ANYA as one of the top emerging female filmmakers on the Alice list of 2020. Since then, ANYA has won the NAACP Image Award 2020 for Outstanding Directing in a Comedy Series for Glow, the episode Outward Bound. And she's also known for directing Blackish, Fresh Off the Boat, and The Good Place. In 2016, ANYA directed her first short film, Lemonade Mafia, starring Marseille Martin, Yvette Nicole Brown, and Ava Akers. Her career catapulted after directing an episode of Blackish in 2017 and continues to soar. Next, Charmin Baaqee. Charmin is the owner and founder of Art is Love, which provides exposure for artists through marketing, social media, and branding. She is a writer, blogger, and also has over 10 years experience as a curator for the East Bay Municipal Utility District Gallery, where she is now Art Committee Chair. She was appointed by the Mayor's Office to the City of Oakland Public Art Advisory Committee, where she now serves as co-chair. Most recently, she was appointed by Mayor Libby Schaaf as one of 11 Cultural Affairs Commissioners. Her passion and appreciation for art and community-based initiatives have been long-standing and have been developed since childhood. As a community member, a lifelong Oakland resident, she values her role as both a stakeholder and collaborator. She currently serves as a community engagement and art consultant and manages large public art installations throughout the Bay Area. Charmin holds a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Clark Atlanta University, another Bachelor of Science in Environmental Engineering from Georgia Institute of Technology, and a Master's of Science in Civil and Environmental Engineering from the University of California at Berkeley. And next, I'm happy to introduce Anne Collins-Smith. Anne is a cultural curator, historian, and worker in the literary, visual, and performing arts. She is the curator of collections at the Spelman College Museum of Fine Art. Anne has participated in the Independent Curators International's Curatorial Intensive and the Getty Leadership Institute's Museum Leaders, the Next Generation programs. She serves on the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority, MARTA, Arts Council, and the Board of Trustees for the Association of Art Museum Curators. Her curatorial work is inspired by New Orleans jazz musician and cultural ambassador Erwin Mayfield's definition of culture. He explains culture is about definition. And if you're not involved in the process of defining yourself, then someone else will define you. And perhaps they'll define you to the point where they think you don't need to exist. And all that Anne undertakes in her avocation as a cultural worker, it's the uplifting and celebration of culture and shared heritage, in addition to assisting to create definition from a multiple of perspectives that drive her work. Ladies, welcome to the panel, The Power of Story. Now, I'd like to share some video excerpts of their Career Girls interviews. Christina, take it away.
I am the curator of collections at the Spelman College Museum of Fine Art. My primary responsibility is to take care of the permanent collection, which houses about 300 objects. Day to day, it's programming, meetings, writing, taking care of art, taking care of people. I like providing context. I like instigating. I like, foregrounding those unknown stories. I like making experiences amazing. And I like, to help people relate to what's on the wall. The Spelman College Museum of Fine Art is the only museum in the nation that highlights work by and about women of the African diaspora. But we like to also examine and showcase what other people are saying about them. So it's really, an inclusive, inviting conversation for everybody.
I'm a first AD on the television show Blackish. There's kind of two pieces to my job. I work in prep and then I shoot an episode. So I take a script and we spend a week in prep with the director, we break down things, and then when we shoot, I'm in charge of the day-to-day activities that are happening on set, rolling the camera, bringing the actors in, making sure people know what's happening next. Now that I'm a first AD and have been for about 10 years, my goals kind of shifted. Typically for a first AD, you move up to the unit production manager or the line producer and you really produce shows. And some assistant directors go the director route, and I think that that's the route that I'd like to start taking. It's really important for you to speak your truth so you feel good about moving forward towards it, but also so that other people know so they can help you. Because most of the time, people want to help you, but if they don't know, they can't help. So I say, speak your truth, say what you want.
I am a civil engineer and I work on environmental projects. I work in the water industry and I help bring safe, clean drinking water into the homes of many residents in the greater Bay Area. A great engineer is one who's an innovator, who's creative. And I think in order to be creative, you have to tap into the right side of your brain. You have to have an interest in art. And not having an interest in art is like not living. Not having an interest in math and science is not living. Programs like STEAM, which stands for science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics. It gives students an opportunity to really see what the process is like, that things don't just appear. There's a planning phase, there's a design phase, and there's a construction phase. And I think having an understanding of what the process is for something to be brought to fruition is important, not only in whatever career you decide, but just in life.
All right. Thank you. My very first question to each of you is, why did you want to participate as a role model? Who wants to go first?
I'll go because I'm coming full circle on something. Something that my dad kind of, what I thought was an admonishment of me was that he said, you have to have things your own way. And as I try to pursue this career, I'm like, yes, this is my own way. So thank you for that. And so there are many other girls out there who are trying to figure it out, who are, going on some uncharted territory, trying to find their own way and make an impact. So I hope that criticism slash blessing from my dad will help them to see that they can also make their own ways in their avocation. So that's it.
Thank you.
I'll go. I stepped into this industry and didn't see anyone that looked like me. So, and it's so funny because I look at that video and I was really also talking to myself because I am not an AD in this space talking to you all. I'm a director now, and I'm an award-winning director, which is like not anything that I had envisioned at that time. So I just feel like for me, as somebody moving through spaces where it's often occupied primarily by white, middle-aged, older men, that the more I can get out and talk to people about what I do and how it might work for them if they want to jump into this space, the better, because as we all know, the more diverse our stories and the people that make our stories are, the better they are. So.
Thank you. Charmin?
For me, I'm a product of lots of mentoring. And one of the things that ANYA mentioned in her video, which really resonated with me, was just the fact that if you ask, you'll realize that most people actually want to help. And I think for me, it's an opportunity to sort of pay it forward. I know that's kind of an obvious thing, but it's really, really important, as we make strides, that we provide a pathway for others to follow, and we provide some guidance for them to actually do that. We're not here alone, so we're never meant to do it alone. So I think it's important, to realize that you're never too young to be a mentor. My daughter is a mentor. Young teenagers are mentors. So the sooner you can actually fill those shoes, I think the better.
Indeed. ANYA touched on this a little bit, but can you share for our audience what's changed in your life since our interview?
I'll start this time. Well, one thing, I lost those earrings I was wearing, and I'm really sad about that. But I think one of the really big things that have changed is when I was interviewed for Career Girls, although I recognize the importance of duality, art and science, I think in terms of my own trajectory, I was thinking of them in sort of a singular fashion. So I was curating and taking on art projects, and I was sort of like, oh, I have this other thing. And then I'm also an engineer. And I remember listening to a podcast, and someone said, you should stop thinking about your passion as your side hustle, And it was one of those things where I started thinking about what are the different ways that I can actually bring these two passions together in the work that I do. So then I started saying, what are the things that I do most as an engineer? And I said, well, one of the things that I do most are, I engage with the community and I manage projects. So I started thinking about how can I do that as an, art consultant / engineer. And I love working with nonprofit organizations. So I had an opportunity to connect more with people through nonprofits, through art, and also through science. Another thing that I was thinking about is, I know how to manage construction projects. I'm an engineer. How can I do that when it relates to art? So then that opened up the door to public art installations. And the thing about it is that, there is a lack of diversity. There's a lack of representation in public art installations. And a lot of times those large public art installations are the ones that get the most eyes. They're the ones with the biggest budgets. And we need to see more women. We need to see more people of color with those opportunities. So I think probably more than anything, I'm sort of stepping away from this silo approach to problem solving as it relates to science and art.
Thank you. Yes.
I was going to say what's changed for me. I feel like when I did my interview, I was kind of at the top of my career in that I was on Black-ish. I knew what I was doing. I was very good at firsting. And so I was mentoring a lot of people and fielding questions, helping people to navigate in the space to become an AD. And now that I'm directing, I find that I have gathered around me a lot more mentors for myself moving through this new kind of experience, and have been leaning on them a lot more than actually mentoring myself. So
cool. And it appears from hearing each of you, it was owning that desire to be who you wanted to be in the world, recognizing all that you had accomplished to be at this point where you are in your storytelling. When did you start to experience that change in perception? Charmin talked about it a little in terms of, I don't have to have silos, and I can bring my side hustle into what I'm doing fully professionally. Was there a moment for either of you where you felt like, okay, this is it?
You're often told to, serve a higher purpose. And so I've been, on the road of serving a higher purpose, and, to let yourself just kind of step back, which I kind of have some issues with because you are part of that higher purpose. But never would I have believed that someone would see this video that I did for Career Girls and invite me to participate in a panel with the Association of Art Museum Curators.
Oh, wow.
It was Jen Merger, who is Mergel, who is an independent curator and a former curator at the Boston Museum of Fine
And
Arts.
one of our role models too.
And so we participated on a panel together, and because of that participation, it led to a greater relationship with the Association of Art Museum Curators, one that has supported artists for the past 20 or so years. And now I am on the board of the Association of Art Museum Curators. And so through this video, I was able to widen my network also during that time. So now I'm currently serving as the interim associate director of the Spelman College Museum of Fine Art.
Wow.
But since that time, also, even just being in that space, and then, just so many spaces of discernment, we are now teaching the next generation of art museum curators. And so
Yes.
we're very happy to have that program. And the next generation of art museum curators at Spelman, at Morehouse, at Clark Atlanta University. So it's
Wow.
so AUC wide. So we have bridged, some gaps. And so I'm really going about my practice in a full-fledged way. And so I would say Career Girls help to boost me to that next step and, make me take stock in that I have accomplished a lot. So thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, and sharing your journey. Anybody else? I mean, I know you've had these career triumphs, but how you saw yourself Anything change?
Since then.
Yeah. Well, then another question I have for you is that you were all doing mentoring before we had the opportunity and the honor to get your story on Career Girls. How has your mentoring changed since you did the interview? Has it informed how you mentor, how you think about mentoring? Talk to us about that.
I would say for sure it has. And one of the things that I stepped into when I was talking to you guys was like thinking like mentoring has to be one person and like they're going to give you all the information and you're stuck to them and they're your person and you go through this experience. And I've discovered that it's really valuable to have a lot of mentors and that it's important that you know what you want. Like you can't just say, hey, I want to direct, will you mentor me? You have to know where you want to go to be able to activate people to mentor you. So you have to be active in the process. And I feel like that was really kind of solidified for me after I spent some time with Career Girls. Yeah.
Charmin?
I think for me, what in terms of the way I mentor has changed is the fact that like you don't necessarily, I'm not only necessarily a mentor for someone who's considering a career in the arts or science. I'm also a mentor for someone who's thinking about being an entrepreneur. I'm also a mentor for other young women who are also mothers and are trying to balance careers and startup businesses. So one of the things that I've thought about is sometimes it's best to approach mentoring in terms of like, how can I help you be successful in whatever you want to do? It doesn't necessarily have to be the same path that I've taken, but how can I help you figure out how to get connected to resources? Mm-hmm. And I think for me, as someone who continues to benefit from mentors, that is, I've learned that sometimes like the folks who you think are going to be your go-to mentors actually show up in a completely different package, so not necessarily limiting yourself to a woman or a woman of a certain age or man or someone of a particular ethnic background. Sometimes it's just a connection. And I think, allowing yourself to be open to any and all connections is really important.
I think with mentoring, you have to meet people where they are and honoring where they are. So I am teaching now. And so right now in a class that's supposed to be 12, I'm mentoring 20 students. And it's an amazing experience. And they stay back behind class. And I'm like, okay, you can sign off. But they really want to know truths. And they want to know your mistakes too and your pitfalls. Mm-hmm. I work with students all the time, but to really have this one-on-one with them is really, really rewarding for me. And also, you never know what you really put out there and who's watching you. So even with your social media, I have a cousin who's watching what I'm doing. I never thought, a distant cousin who was really watching what I was doing. I'm just so inspired by that, and I'm even more compelled. So you're mentoring, and you don't even know it sometimes. So yeah, I think how it's changed for me is that I'm trying to be my most authentic self with warts and all.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And, was there an alternative path that your careers could have taken? And if so, what was that defining moment that set you on the path that you're on now?
I would say I went to school to be a psychologist. So my mother was a doctor. I didn't want to go to med school because I didn't want to deal with cadavers, but I really like talking to people and helping solve problems. Like I enjoyed that. So I thought, oh, psychology, maybe I can do that. And so I was studying that. And for me, the pivotal moment that happened was, and I gave you guys the link, is I joined a group called Up With People, which is an international touring group, and they traveled around the world. They do a 2-hour show, and they stayed in host families, and it was all about showing how all of us, it was international, so it was showing how, you know, the world can work together to create something beautiful. And that was really exciting for me, and it totally changed my career path, because I didn't want to sit in a room anymore and counsel. I wanted to be out there making art, and so I found television that way.
Charmin.
I intended to go to law school. And
Oh,
so an iconic case happened in 1993, and I said I could never, defend someone who I wasn't sure about. And so I became an advocate in other ways. I kept pursuing the art history classes, and so I lucked upon this field. But also, when I was living in New York at the time, trying to find a job in museums, not finding something that would pay my Chelsea rent, I was working for U.S. News and World Report, and I was working in the publisher's office. So that was with advertising sales and everything. And I was phenomenally successful. And then I was accepted to this fellowship program at the St. Louis Art Museum. And so I said, okay, well, I'll change I'll go with the second original plan. My brother, who was living in St. Louis, I'm like, okay, great. I get to meet his kids. I get to spend time with his kids. And so I chose love as opposed to corporate. And what's so beautiful about that story, Anya, is that my brother wanted to go with Up With People. He wanted to join Up With People,
what?
but he wasn't permitted to.
Why?
I don't know.
Oh no,
But he's
I'm
an
so
artist in
sad
so
to hear
many
this.
other ways. And so this is so full circle. And so
Wow.
sometimes I doubt that decision, but your sharing that just was like, yeah, she did the right thing. So
Oh,
thank
that's amazing.
you for that. So there have been many pivots. And so, yes.
Yeah.
I love
Wow.
these connections.
That's amazing.
This is great.
Yeah.
Charmin, when we've come together and you've been in community with other role models, just seeing how these connections and, sort of shared experiences in developing the community comes together. But for you, what was that pivotal?
The interesting thing is when I was in elementary upwards through high school, I always had an affinity for math and science, but I also love writing and I love the arts. And I used to redecorate my dollhouses and try to make clothes and do all kinds of fun things. But, here I was, a young Black girl who had an interest in math and science. And my teachers and mentors, they took notice of that and they were like, you're going to be an engineer, which I'm grateful for, but it was sort of like at that point early on, I was headed in that trajectory. So I followed along that path. I went through school, got the degrees, and really enjoyed it and was grateful that the first 4 years of my college education was at a HBCU because I really felt like I was nurtured and more prepared for a larger, technical school after the fact. But I say that to say that interest in writing and the arts, it never went away, And so even though I was kind of moving along this path in engineering, there was always sort of this almost like a longing or something was missing. And it doesn't mean that it wasn't still part of me because as I mentioned in that video, we should expect our scientists and engineers to be creative, right? So it's always been there. But one thing that Anya mentioned that I think is really interesting is that even though, she started off as a psychology major, I'm sure that the work that you do, there's an element of understanding human behavior,
Yes.
That's part of your work. So it's kind of like one of those things that even when you think you've sort of chosen this other path, those things that you've done along the way, those other paths that you've taken, I think, and you sort of alluded to this too, those matter and they are part of the building blocks for your overall success. So don't feel like you've wasted your time doing these other things because they matter and they help you along the way.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. I want the point, something that jumps out for me, for all of you as storytellers, you've all excelled in a visual context. Why were you drawn to the power of stories in that way, storytelling in that manner, visually?
I mean, I can say both my parents were artists. My mother was a doctor, but she also created art. And my father was an art professor and is actually just now having, at 77, resurgence of his art being loved and revered in Canada. So I was surrounded by art growing up, the visual medium of painting. We didn't have a TV. I didn't have a TV at home until I was 17.
Wow.
So I never, like, all that stuff from my youth that everybody watched, I didn't, I mean, I watched it sometimes at friends' house, but I didn't watch it. I read a lot. And so I think, creating worlds in my mind from reading and so on is what really is an underpinning for me in terms of being in this visual medium and really being connected to it on a core level. Yeah.
Thank you, Anya. Anne?
How it started, I trace my curatorial practice to me being a little girl. And I need to also add that in one of my individual education plans, it stated to take Anne to museums and expose her to arts. And never would I thought I would be in this world. But that said, so the person who I said was my brother, was my uncle, but my parents raised him.
Mm.
And so one time I decided that I wanted to put up, he had just painted the hallway, and I said, I want to put up a show. And so I put up a show, and he was like, okay, whatever, Brad. And that's what he called me. But also, my curatorial studies, my curatorial career came through storytelling. And that was me using the Viewmaster and a Viewmaster projector to project these stories onto the wall. They were fairy tales then, but I added my own bent. So for me, it's always been about storytelling and play. And I think that once we share our stories, we'll find so many more commonalities amongst each other. And so it builds for richer dialogues, exhibitions, other kinds of engagements with each other. So it's central to my curatorial practice.
Right, Charmin?
So growing up, I wasn't necessarily exposed to art in the sense of like being in fine art spaces. I think my school, we maybe went to the museum a couple of times. My parents weren't practicing artists. And I say that intentionally because my mother is an artist. My mother has a knack for interior design, and I followed her around the house. One of my jobs was, I was a furniture mover, and and she had this display of home magazines all around the house. So we'd flip through them, and she always had like this really great understanding of colors. And I think, between those sort of experiences and just being a kid who actually played outside and was used to creating things without having a lot to create from, a lot of that influenced my interest in arts. The other thing is that the curatorial practice is it's like the art of arrangement, and engineers and scientists take data and arrange data to tell a narrative, to tell a story. So in a lot of ways, there is that overlap. So when I'm curating a show, or I'm helping to select artists, right, which is also a big part of the narrative, right? Or when I'm moving pieces together to kind of think about how a big public art installation will exist in an outdoor space. All of those things are, in a lot of ways, how my mind works as an engineer. An artist will tell you they create work and it's inspired by something. But when they release it to the world, they want there to be room for a viewer to have their own sort of experience and an interpretation of the work. So as a curator, you're balancing, allowing space for a viewer to sort of see their own narratives, right? to see their own stories or see other stories, right? Be aware of other people's stories, but at the same time, making sure that the artist's voice is still heard. And I think anytime we have an opportunity to be a vessel to allow that to happen in some shape or form, we're all living curators, right? We're all sharing stories.
Thank you for that. In what ways are you working to create more opportunities for underrepresented folks in your field?
I'll go. I work with a colleague of mine, and we have a podcast called Sister Brunch. And the the idea behind it, it kind of came from we used to have gatherings as assistant directors where we would all come together, primarily women of color and their mentors who are women of color, to be able to just decompress and talk about working in the industry and how to navigate it and things we might have gone through. This podcast is a little bit broader in that it brings in women behind the scenes primarily that work in the industry to talk about their careers and how they got there, so that young women can and it's primarily women of color. So just talking to them about where they started and how they got there, and some quick little tidbits. So that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years, and it's really satisfying because a lot of my friends have been able to come on it, that are in different parts, but also we've been able to kind of illuminate, kind of like you guys do in Career Girls, all these different jobs that people don't know about, specifically in film and television, that could be really exciting and fun for somebody, but they just didn't have the opportunity to learn about it.
Thank you for doing that work. Anne?
Sure. So a large part of my position at Spelman is to prepare the next generation of the arts leaders, but I am also, for the next month or so, working with a group of fifth graders as an artist in residence, and it's an amazing experience. So these are students who are in inner city Atlanta who may or may not have had experiences with museums. We're looking at portraits, and we're talking about the work that I do, the work that centers them, that makes sure that they are seen in museums as well. And I was so surprised by how much they pay attention and how much they're uplifted by it. From showing them a Kehinde Wiley painting, for showing them imagery they've never seen, like such a person on a horse and esteemed as such. So letting them know who they are, and hopefully we will welcome some curators out of that. So yeah, so start very early, as Charmin said. You never know. Yeah.
So true.
Indeed. Charmin?
So one of the things that I think is really important is talking to youth about how to see themselves as leaders, and to see themselves in spaces that they typically aren't seen. And well, not just youth, but I think just anyone who's sort of emerging into whatever field that they're going into. So one of the things that I'd like to talk about, like in my role as a commissioner, on any other board, is how can we sort of provide an opportunity to fill in the pipeline. Mm-hmm. So as I mentioned before, in large public art installations, there is a lack of diversity and definitely a lack of women with those opportunities. So when I've had an opportunity to do so, and actually I did so recently in a large project, is I approached an experienced artist, and I asked him, he's white male, if he would be willing to consider an apprentice on the project that we were proposing for. And in doing so, I was able to link this artist who has 20 plus years, and he's a fantastic talent, great person, with a young Black male sculpture artist who's just starting out, who doesn't have access to a shop, who typically works with wood, but wanted to get into working with metal. So now he has access to equipment. He has access to the knowledge of this other person who's been in the field for a long time. So as we progress in our leadership roles, it's like, well, how can we kind of like, you ask folks who have the resources to extend a hand. We can be that the connectors, but really it's up to the folks involved to really want to make that work happen. So I think in whatever field you're in and whatever stage you're at, if you see sort of a gap, it's not enough just to talk about the gap. Like, how can we facilitate filling in that gap? So that's one of the things that I've been really trying to make sure that I do in the work that I do.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for doing that. One other thing that I'd like to get from each of you is, advice that you would give to young people to step into leadership roles. Anya, you touched on it a little bit in terms of, you've got to bring something to the table when you're looking to have a mentor or a sponsor. So, what tips, advice could you share for a young person watching this? Leadership.
Do you want me to go? Okay. I would say one of the things because I feel like I've been a leader a lot in my life. A lot of that is because I talk a lot and I'm not afraid to get out there, but that doesn't mean that you can't be a leader if that you're nervous or shy. One of the things that I felt that has helped me be a leader consistently is walking my walk. Like, if I say something, I do it. I don't have like multiple levels of, like, I'm trying to formulate how to say this. Like, I lead by example. If we're all in a group and it's COVID and, I don't just say, oh, okay, well, we're over here so we can take off our masks. No, you have to like follow the rules that you're setting out for the group that you're in. And I think people see you, even if there's another leader leading, that's, they see you when you are strong in your convictions and living up to the social agreement that you guys have made. So you can be a leader within the group without actually also being like number one or the loudest,
Just step up.
That would be my answer.
Thank you, Anya. Anne?
I would say self-awareness is key. And that's something I'm really growing into. And with the help of the Center for Curatorial Leadership, that's, making me realize what gifts you bring. We all bring gifts we all have doubts, but we also have these gifts. So be aware of what your strengths and the areas for growth are. And so you can work and you can launch from there. So self-awareness is key for me.
And Charmin?
I think one thing that's important is identifying understanding that there are lots of different ways that you can lead. So for me, one thing I would say is, if you have an opportunity to join a board or a student council or something, or even like your neighborhood organization, like meeting or group, do so, because there's, one, it gives you a bit more agency, right? But then you also meet people along the way who can connect you in ways that you'd never even imagine. But if joining a board is not for you, then, there are other routes that you might want to take. Like, for example, like if you're passionate about, this sounds weird because I feel like everyone should be passionate about social justice, but if you're an environmental activist, if you're a social justice activist, you may not necessarily want to join the board, but you may want to be an organizer, right? Or you may want to be the artist who's in charge of the graphics, but the key is to take a lead on something, right? Because then you have a say in kind of what all is involved, what's created, what comes of it. But also, like I said, you have an opportunity to make all kinds of connections. But if you do decide that you want to join a board, I would definitely encourage you to consider looking into, now there's probably a lot more virtual classes, a class on how to be an effective board member. So I took a class with a local organization here in Oakland called Compass Point, and it's called, and I think they still have it, How to Be an Effective Board Member, because it really does help, so that how boards work, how you can be as effective as possible, and you know, how to navigate that whole terrain.
Thank you.
That's
You
awesome.
know,
That's awesome.
while you're on recommendations, since we're on a library program, does anybody have a recommendation for our audience on a book to read? Yes, Anya, go.
I have 3 recommendations because I'm a reader. One, if you want to be a director, there's a great book called Directors Tell the Story. And I'll tell you guys who it's by, but it's 2 female directors, drama and comedy, and they're amazing. Bethany Rooney is one of them. And then the other one is Neil Gaiman's American Gods. I love the idea of old gods coming to America and fighting to stay alive. It's a really great series. And then I also would say The Power of One by Bryce Courtney. Those are some good books.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. Who else, Anne?
I think I'm reading like so many books simultaneously with Audible and just for work. So
Yes.
one of the books I'm listening to with Audible is The New Negro about Alain Locke, who is one of the more instrumental individuals with the Harlem Renaissance, but really just thinking and learning about what he thought about cultural pluralism and the pitfalls and the snares that he had to go through to forge who he is or who he was. Also, I'm reading Cast, and I'm reading that with the President's Reading Circle with Spellman. Um, and also, I can't wait to. I wish they would write a book about Ellis Hazlip, who did the Soul show on PBS in New York, because I would love to learn more about him. And maybe this is a call, and maybe this is something for me to do. But the way in which he brought all the arts together with a certain consciousness. So that has been my best viewing, not reading yet. So I will be reading more of him. So yeah.
Thank you. Charmin.
Okay, so right now I'm reading a group of short stories by Octavia Butler, and I can't remember the name of the book because there's all these short stories, but I definitely would recommend reading that. And I can grab it, but I may go blank for a second. And then there's one other book, and I almost feel like, and I just thought about this because I'm sitting next to my bookshelves. There's a book that I read in college by Elaine Brown called The Taste of Power. And it's like one of those like you must reads. And I'm also thinking about it because in Oakland, there was recently a mural dedicated to the women of the Black Panther movement. And there's also a street in West Oakland that has been named Dr. Huey P. Newton Street, I think. And so and there's a lot of momentum around fundraising and bringing more awareness to the Black Panther Party and that entire movement. There's a plan is in the works to install like a bus of Huey P. Newton. So I'm thinking about all this. But the interesting thing about this book is that years later, last year, actually, during the pandemic, I was flipping through, actually, my daughter pulled the book out of the bookshelf and we were flipping through it. And there's this little note that falls out of the book. And it's a handwritten note by Elaine Brown that I completely had like a brain fart.
Wow.
And I met her when I was in college, and she like hand wrote this note to me, so it was like one of those things where it was kind of like that book was such an important part of like me learning more about myself, about Black people, about the movements here in Oakland, and to like have that book just sitting on the shelf, and then my daughter pulls it out. So I know that's a lot, but just kind of just a reminder that yes, what we read and kind of that helps kind of shape how we see ourselves as active participants and not in our own lives, only our own lives, but in our communities. So, it's important to really be thoughtful about kind of what you pick up to read and how you share that.
My daughter Erica is writing her memoir. So speaking of daughters, mothers and daughters, so yeah. Being Elaine Brown's daughter, yes.
Ladies, I feel like we could keep talking for another hour or so. We are at the end of this discussion, but I just want to say to our audience, what you're seeing, what you've witnessed is really just the tip of the iceberg of the stories, of the knowledge, of the wisdom, of the insight that every single woman that we've been honored to interview brings and shares freely with the world. So, if you're a parent or a teacher, just go to our website. We've got ways to help you easily incorporate any of these stories into the work that you do. But it's been wonderful to revisit my time with you and to let our audience hear how great it is to just be inspired by your wisdom.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of my fellow panelists, too. This has been awesome. And thanks to San Francisco Public Library for allowing this to happen.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Wow. As a librarian, I'm just so thrilled that you all had your books just at the ready. We are definitely creating a Career Girls book list that will go live. I will send you all the link.
Awesome.
It'll be on our socials because honestly,
Great.
what you just offered us was just golden nuggets of what you're interested, what you see in your communities, what's been part of your lives. And as a woman of color, oh my gosh, I'm just swimming in gratitude for the deep intelligence, the reflection, the wisdom, and your time. I know you are all very busy women, and I appreciate you, Anya Adams, and Colin Smith, and Charmin Roundtree Baaqee. Thank you so much for everything. And I have to thank Linda so much. Thank you for just the work that you've done to create the resource of Career Girls. Thank you for bringing together this incredible panel. I agree. We could do this a whole other hour, and then we could just cycle through the 700 videos you have and do a whole year series.
We're down for it. We're totally down for it. It's an honor. It's just an absolute honor and a privilege to be a platform for these women to share their wisdom and their knowledge, and to give girls everywhere what I wished I'd had growing up. So with all of them, with all of you, we're leaving it better than we found it.
Absolutely. And as your partner in that platform, the library is here to be able to further amplify the work that you all have all done. And so we hope to see you again. We loved having you here.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. So that's all, folks. Happy Women's History Month. We are starting off March so beautifully. If you love today's program, please check out our calendar for more virtual Her Story events. Take good care of yourselves, stay safe, be well, and we hope to see you back at the San Francisco Public Library Virtual Library soon. Take good care, everyone.
Thank you.